Thank you.
James is next up to that.
I'm trying to understand and wrestle with this feeling that kind of this distinction between having some kind of good intention and that maybe was in harmony with law, and some like good qualities in myself that were in harmony with law.
Yep.
But those things have like taken me really off track, and I've ended up doing things way out of harmony with
It's
law.
not those things that are taking you off track. Can I explain why? And this is very important to understand.
It's so important not to blame the
good things.
good things, the pure desire.
Yeah, what you're doing is getting into the after hearing these truths, there's two ways a person generally goes. They either go, oh, but I've got good intentions, but all those good intentions seem to have misled me. And then it's not the good intentions that are ever misleading you. So that's the first thing you need to bear in mind. It's the bad intentions that are misleading you.
I guess I'm questioning even if I had good intentions.
Well, I do feel you have some good intentions. Yeah.
But it's important.
But there's a very powerful bad intention that's misleading you. And so this is what we need to discuss. Okay? And perhaps this is a good, firstly, a segue into what I wanted to cover with everybody about priorities. So let's deal with the priorities and then answer this question, if we can do that. Now, you were present last week, James, weren't you? So you already know that some about these priorities that we talked about. Yeah. So let's just remind everybody of those priorities. So the highest level of things you can deal with that are going to have the best long-term effect in your life are what things?
Spiritual
things. So that's the highest priority. Now, these are things like, an example of it is equality that we just mentioned. Being equal, that is a spiritual concept and therefore of the highest priority. Follow? Yep. Now, the next one down was? Emotional. So these kind of concepts are relating to how I feel about things. So it's like, how do I feel about equality? Do I want to be equal to others, or do I want to be less, or do I want to be more powerful than others? Do I want to be considered to be special, or do I want to be considered to be normal? Right? I keep saying to people in Australia, I'm the most normal guy you're going to meet. I'm not special in any way. I'm not highly intelligent. I'm not highly clever on any issue. I'm not highly educated, actually, either. From the perspective of the world, I'm not highly educated. And all of my education comes from God. So actually, it's got nothing to do with me as to what I know. It's got everything to do with just the relationship, the desire I have for the relationship with God. So I don't credit myself with anything bar a few things that I have had to develop myself. And they are things like my humility, I've had to develop myself. My faith, I've had to develop myself. Does that make sense? But when it comes to truth, receiving truth, almost all the truth I've ever received first came from me, firstly, looking around me and seeing, which is an important thing to do, and becoming self-aware, but eventually it just came from God, like the truth. So all the truth I'm sharing with you comes from that source. So it's not my truth. It's not anything to do with me, right? I'm also, I have areas of passion, and I'm pretty. I like my areas of passion. I investigate all these areas of passion. There's many of you don't know yet, but in the spirit world, I'm an artist. Some of you will see my art in the spirit world. I've got grand galleries in the spirit world of my art, and I'm a musician as well in the spirit world. Some of you will hear my music eventually in the spirit world. You will. But all of the things that I'm able to do, I am only able to do because of the love I've received, and I'm very conscious of that. Does that make sense? So, the way I sort of see myself is, I'm just this child of God who's very inquisitive. That's what I am. I'm just an inquisitive child of God. And I'm probably, if anybody said, well, how inquisitive am I? Well, I'm one of the most inquisitive people I've ever met. So I'm a very inquisitive person, right? So in that regard, but I'm not looking for power over others. I'm looking to learn. I'm looking to understand. I'm looking to be a student of God. A child of God who, the way I sort of see it is, God wants to educate me, and the more open and humble I am, the more I'll get educated. That's sort of the way I view it. So I have a spiritual condition which is also based upon humility, which is actually a spiritual quality. It's a quality, if you develop that quality, it's going to help you for the rest of your existence, and it's going to lead you to a state of bliss, actually, that one quality. If you appropriately engage it in harmony with truth, it will lead you to that state. The truth will set you free, but it's your humility that allows you to receive it. Yeah. So here I am. I've got spiritual is the highest, emotional is the next highest. What was the next one?
Sexual.
So these are things to do with our sexuality. Laws that govern our sexuality, our moral condition with regard to our sexuality. And then the last one was
physical.
So you could say this is like a hierarchical system of the way to engage law. Now, when you focus your attention on the spiritual, your life will change the most. Right? So that's a general principle each of us need to grasp and understand. Many of you believe you change your emotions, your life changes the most, after you've heard divine truth, of course. Many of you believe that, but it's not actually true. It's when you change spiritually that your life changes the most. Right? So that's something that we need to come to terms with. Yeah? Now, the question, so let's look at the question you've asked. You said that I've got some good intentions. So what do you believe are your good intentions?
To try and help, to be in service.
Help others?
Yeah.
Be of service?
To help change the environment.
Yep. So to be more environmentally aware and help the environment improve.
Be part of regenerating.
Yeah. So regen of environment. That's I'll just put it short. Regen of environment. So that's a good thing, isn't it? Because obviously we all got to live here, and also it's good for your children and grandchildren and so forth as well, because I've got to live here too if they're going to have a life on Earth at all. Okay, so these are good things. Anything else you can think of off the top of your head?
Yeah, just have a real passion to try and make it so when children come, it's not so hard.
Okay, so
children arriving.
Yeah. Okay, so shall we say? Well, let's put it what it is: care of children. Not just care in terms of day-to-day care, but care for their future. Yeah, which is a nice quality. Sure, certainly. No problem with any of those, is there? They're all in harmony with the law of love, are they not? Yep. So no problem there. Okay. What are some emotions that you have and spiritual beliefs that you have that start corrupting these ideas?
I'm better than everyone else.
Good. So superiority. So I'm better than everybody else. I know or understand this better than everyone else.
Like stronger, more powerful.
Power, yes, power, big one. It gives me power over others. They become more influenced by me. Yep. So that's power. Yep. Any others you can think of?
That people adore me. That I get.
Very good.
Put on
yeah.
pedestal.
Adoration. Pedestal. That's a good word.
Pedestal is a good word. Yeah, pedestal. This is demonstrating good self-awareness, James. So it's good. So a good thing here, some self-awareness. Here's another good thing. We'll put that on that one, right? That's good. Okay, can you see? These things lead me to do some good things. These things are going to corrupt my good things. Can you see that? Yep. Now, can you see how powerful the corruption could be? if you have a be of service feeling, but at the same time want to be superior and have power over others, can you see where it can lead you? It can lead you into some very dark places with some very dark spirit influence. And in fact, you do have some quite dark spirit influence around you, leading you, because they can feel in you this feeling and this feeling in particular, and this feeling. They feel it in you very strongly. And so they're surrounding you, trying to use the truth of you wanting to do these things against you. Does that make sense? Because they know you have these flaws. You could call these things are disobedience to the law, aren't they? Yeah? Disobedience to the law of equality, disobedience to the laws governing humility. Yeah? Disobedience, and this involves even sexual adoration, by the way, because that's something you're prone to. And so, a lot of women have a tendency to adore you, look up to you. And this is also part of the feelings that you're wanting. So with this set of feelings, can you see, you might have these motivations, but these sets of feelings, which are also motivating you in a sinful manner, at the same time as these feelings are trying to motivate you in a loving manner. And can you see it's just the severity of the problem, in other words, internally, how you measure how much you need a thing, right? That's going to determine what the outcome is. And unfortunately, this has been a bigger severe problem than this is benefiting you at this stage. Does that make sense? Because what's happening is these things are growing, right? And the problem with them growing, so you could end up doing these things in a state of humility, right? Or you can end up not doing these things at all and these things dominating your entire life. That's sort of what you're facing right now, actually, as the internal battle. You could think of this as an internal battle for your soul. The sin, which is these things, this is where you're breaking the law and desiring to break the law. These things is where you're trying to do good and not break the law. So these are the things where you're doing loving things, trying to do loving things. And here's where you're trying to break the law, you could say, right? And you can see it's just how much importance you place on each thing's relatively that's going to determine the outcome. You follow what I'm saying? Yeah. For yourself, if you place as much relative power positioning of these things as you currently do, it's going to end up in a very dark location for you. So this is the thing I would be working on for you, is that these things. Now, the reason why I brought up your specific example and latched onto it is because it illustrates the basic points, doesn't it? That the feeling of being superior is a spiritual problem. It's not just an emotional one. It's a disharmony with the equality laws, the laws of love governing equality. Does that make sense? So it's actually a deep spiritual problem that is being faced there. The desire for power is also a spiritual problem, because actually, if you think about it, if I truly understand my position in the universe, God is the one with the power, God is the one with the laws, and all I am is his creation. So any power I actually have is gifted to me. It's not actually really mine. It's a gift that God gave me, because he created me, he created my ability to express myself and everything else. So he gave me those powers, right? So when I want those powers for myself, I've got a spiritual problem. So adoration is an emotional problem, right? Because it's sort of like, if you're only doing things, or if you're doing things because you get adoration, then you're going to be very influenced to do those things more, right? And that would that then is an addiction. See, what I find is that I do things because they're just right, not because I'm adored. And the reality is, very few people on earth adore me at this point. I could probably maybe five people on earth, maybe, right? And so I'm not addicted to adoration. I'm used to the opposite, actually, being constantly attacked and belittled and condescended to, and even the spirits with you want to condescend to me. So, you know, I'm used to all that. They get annoyed because it doesn't have a lot of effect on me, but it's, you know, the need for adoration is going to be, it's like a vortex that is coming out of you, like needing it from other people. It's actually, I see it as a weakness in the soul, the need for adoration, because it's going to mean you're only going to end up doing the things that people adore you for. Yeah. So, yeah. Desire to be on a pedestal, another spiritual quality, because God wants us equal. The only time God gives us anything other than equal, like responsibilities, Mary and I have responsibilities, but it's only because we already know ourselves to be equal, you know. And that's one of the reasons why we're given the responsibilities, because we understand that probably more than most people do. So being on a pedestal, spiritual problems. So can you see a lot of these problems are actually spiritual problems? They contain emotion, right? So obviously the desire for power comes from powerlessness issues in childhood generally, or the feeding of power in childhood by one or both parents. In your case, by mum, it seems to me, has fed a lot of your feelings that you're her ideal son for a while in your childhood and through your teenage years. So this has fed the feeling of desire for power and superiority, you know. So these things are going to have to be addressed because, and if you address them, you're addressing spiritual problems. So that's going to have the biggest effect on your life. It's going to have a wide-reaching effect if you address that. Firstly, just addressing those will get rid of all the negative spirit influence you're under. The whole lot of it will probably go just addressing those 4 things. Does that make sense to you? And the beauty of addressing those things is then you have some clarity in terms of what is actually my desire versus what is the Spirit's desire to do that so they can get that. What is the Spirit's desire to do that so they can get that? So at the moment, they're sort of motivating you to do many of these things because you believe them to be good. And so they can easily motivate you to do them, but their object is to get this, their addiction met. Right? So their object is very dark, really. And they don't really care what happens to you in that process. And they want you, of course, to be in harmony or agreement with them so that they can have a stronger bond to get these things from you. You follow? Yeah. So this is very good. This is the fact that you have some self-awareness. Remember that we said last week, awareness is not an awakening. You remember we said awakening involves feeling all of this, like how sort of bad it is in the soul, and then wanting to change that. Awareness is, I know that I've got these things happening, so that's very good that you at least know that, because a lot of people in your position, with the amount of spirit influence you actually do have, are not even aware of that. They don't even aware that these are problems that they're facing. Now, it's not that that's leading you astray. So all of the pure things relating to the obedience of God's laws are not leading you astray. And these things will bring you rewards if purely motivated. So they'll bring you rewards. But it's that's going to bring some severe consequence. And the other problem is one spiritual fact, it's a very important spiritual fact, I think I mentioned it last week, is if you become a teacher of others, you must make sure that what you're teaching is true. Right? Now, I don't mean expressing your opinion. There's many times people ask me my opinion, and I'm saying, well, my opinion is this. Now, God, you're allowed to have an opinion, and as I said earlier, my opinions change on a daily basis. So an opinion is fine, as long as you're not teaching it as a fact, right? As soon as you start teaching it as fact, you're now setting yourself up as a teacher. Now, if you setting yourself up as a teacher is not really a God-appointed assignment, now you'll be going to be teaching others falsehood. That destroys lives. And in fact, most of you don't know this, but the people who are in the worst places in hell at times are the people who, not Stalin and not Hitler and those kind of people, but the people who taught falsehood, that generations of people. So you think about Stalin and Hitler, these people influenced or harmed people just in their generation. Once they died and the people who were harmed by them died, the new generation is hardly harmed by them anymore. When you set yourself up as a teacher, it's every generation for thousands of years can be harmed. Can you feel the significance of the difference? One set of people harm just the generation. The other set of people were harming people for thousands of years. So, for example, the people who corrupted Christianity, many of them are still in hell and they're in a darker place than Hitler is. Right? So that's sobering if you look at that. And this is why bringing yourself into line with spiritual principles is very important. So it's actually very dangerous for you to teach others why all these conditions exist. You follow? And in fact, the spirits with you are using your desire to do this, right? And your desire to have these feelings against you. They're agreeing with you doing that as long as they get that.
And you can see how you even end up questioning. If you think about your question, you got to this point where you're like, do I even have these things anymore?
Yeah, you're questioning that. And that's not a good thing to question because these are good things. What needs to happen is the purification of them. So there's not tainted by the error or the sin. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've been trying to figure out, like whether I need to stop, so I've stopped a lot of things happening. When I started to realise this was happening, so I've stopped a lot of it. Part of me wants to just stop anything to do with that list on the right, but I think I just got to figure that out.
The best course of action is to start looking at these things more seriously and to start addressing those things, the desire for those things. It's the desire for these things that attract the spirits helping you with those desires too. So the trouble is they are motivated to connect to someone like you to have power over others. You're also, for different emotional and spiritual reasons, desiring the same thing. So now the good things that you want to do get tainted by, you could say, the bad spiritual and emotional condition that exists. If you can address the spiritual and emotional condition with more sincerity for yourself, then doing these things will not be dangerous at all. You won't enter into superiority with others. You won't be, enter into I'm better than you because I'm helping you. You won't enter into, some kind of damage of children by teaching them things that are actually out of harmony with love. And your self-awareness will turn into self-awakening, like you'll awaken to the problems and the sins you face, and these things will eventually disappear. Yeah. So you don't give up the good.
Yeah, and can I say this is a lot how, if you like, evil wins on earth. We meet a lot of people who say, I was doing this thing, I thought I loved it. Some of it's not even those things. I just loved it. And then I realized, I've got all these addictions and injuries and I was actually harming everyone with what I thought that I loved. So I'm just going to stop doing what I love because obviously it's harming people. But actually, you still walk away with these same issues and just take it to the next thing that you do.
Yeah. And
so the evil continues, but the aspiration for good has stopped.
Yeah.
So it's a very important lesson.
So in that way, sort of evil is won.
Yeah.
Yeah. So not a good thing to do. Huh? Yeah. Thank you. You're fine with that answer? You get that? Yeah. Good on.
Yeah. And I mean, obviously, James, we're not saying just carry on and just deal with those things as a side issue. No. It's
obviously these are the sin. This is, remember, if we think of this diagram here, if we these keep turning on me. If you think of that diagram there, can you see that if I can focus on stopping myself doing these things through, obviously it's going to have to be an emotional and spiritual process that stops these things. If I can stop these things, then anything I choose to do will be in this category. And therefore I can, every one of those things you listed of what you want to do, you could do every one of them and it'll all be fine. There'll be no problems at all. No, it'll in fact benefit you, benefit your future life now and in the spirit world, as well as benefit others. But if you live in this place, not dealing with some of those spiritual problems, then you can see, you can take actions, but they're all going to be tainted by the sin. And then as a result of that taint, there's a sort of like a thing that happens that you end up almost making little decision here and another 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 little decision here. And really what you're doing is stepping into hell as you make every little decision. And for most people, they don't realise that. So let's say my condition is here, and then I make a little decision, and then I'm working along there, and a little decision, I'm working along there. In terms of my condition of love, you can see it's only by looking and comparing before that I'm going to probably see that I've changed. And this is something that happens on earth with everything, including the environment. Most of us are not noticing the change. We're making a little decision here, a little decision there, little decision there. Oftentimes we think we're being better with it, make a little decision, but we're not understanding that if you compared, say, the environment here, not in England so much, because England had tens of thousands of years of little decisions to result in the current environment you got here, which is utterly, devastatingly destroyed. And if it wasn't for rain, you would be in bad trouble here in England, right? You're already in bad trouble, but you'd be in a lot worse if it wasn't for the fact you got regular rainfall. In other countries, we see, like Austria, they're very similar, like huge destruction that's happened over centuries, and every generation didn't notice the little bit of extra they were doing and the little bit of extra they were doing. And the key in your life is to become sensitive. That was a little bit darker than what I was doing before. You know, something's wrong here. You know, I've got to stop this trajectory, because if you just do a little bit darker, a little bit darker, a little bit darker, before you know it, it's going to be black, you know. And this is the trouble we face in the world as well with the environment. We're all sort of doing a little bit darker, a little bit darker, a little bit darker, not measuring the results very rapidly. And as a result, there's going to be some pretty dire consequences for the whole earth ahead of us, because we're not noticing the little bit that we're doing, you know. So before, I just raised the issue of toilet paper, which seems to be, right, a really innocent issue. But you can see there's spiritual things involved in it. Like everything has a spiritual thing involved in it generally, a spiritual attitude, you know, involved in it. Like the spiritual attitude of economy is involved in it. And that's a beautiful spiritual attitude. If we develop economy in everything we do, life is going to be a lot better, right? So it's a beautiful spiritual attitude, but most of us, we don't notice the decay of spiritual attitudes very rapidly. We generally only notice the physical thing. Because remember last week we talked about being physically, sensorially centric. In other words, we're just measuring the senses of our body, taste, touch, you know, what we can smell, see, hear. That's the way we measure everything. And as a result of being sensorially bound, right, God's intention was that we weren't going to be bound by it, but we use it to interface with the world. But many people on earth are bound by their senses to the point where unless something is so obvious, they can't see there's really any change, unless it's right bang in your face. So the interesting thing was COVID. COVID was a bang in your face thing, wasn't it? Right? But your rights as individuals, what I mean by that is the free will that we should be given as individuals has been eaten away by your governments for 40, 50 years during the wars and afterwards, Second and First World Wars, and afterwards, your rights have been slowly eroded more and more and more and more, and the average person didn't notice until COVID. And when COVID came along, now this video is probably going to get banned, right?
Yeah.
Because I mentioned COVID, but anyway, another problem, right? And once that came along, it's in everybody's face, and when it's in everybody's face, now they become aware. Oh, our rights are being controlled here, or our free will is being controlled here, right? But it's been going on for centuries of time. And most of us don't notice because it's just eke a little bit out. And unfortunately for most of us, it's the same with our sin. We just do a little bit more. Our intention is not to end up in darkness for the most part, but because we're just doing a little bit more, allow a little bit more. And you see this happening in the world today everywhere. And I see it in the young people in particular everywhere. Like, you look at the sexual issues that young people face nowadays, there's been so much erosion of sexual morality that now there's no such thing as sexual morality almost. Right? So it's just eaten away to the point where, from God's assessment, it's dark as dark sexually. And yet, the average person doesn't really see it very much. They see it more as progression. Yeah, freedom, interestingly enough. So very important, and so it's a very good question. Really the question is, I'm doing something that I think is good, but why is it that it doesn't always turn out good? And the answer is because there are corruptions involved in the good. Yeah. Good day, Johnny, down the front here.